Hello world, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor, with another free screencast in my Coding Bootcamp 101 series. This time we're going to talk about JavaScript. The goals of this video are to understand the role and purpose of JavaScript, to review its syntax, and to identify some good JavaScript learning resources. If you've watched my Coding 101 Bootcamp series, you know that I define the full stack as these 5 key technologies. On the front end, there are 3, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We put those in the front end because they run right in the browser. There is no special server or server operating system necessary to learn these 3 technologies. And if you're going to be in computer science, and if you're going to provide information for human consumption, you're probably going to be providing that as a web page. These are the 3 languages you'll need to create that web page. So it just makes sense to me for all computer science majors to start on the front end and learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the reason I'm using this as my image on this slide is that some people think that the full stack programmer is a myth, is a unicorn, and that's kind of a nickname that some have given to the full stack developer. I highly disagree with that. I do believe that you will find your niche in life and you will go deep into one of these main areas. However, I think you need to know where they all fit in order to really be the best you can be. And that's what I'm trying to get across in my Coding 101 series, Sequencing the Stack. I believe that the steps to take to become a full stack developer start with 1, 2, and 3, HTML, hypertext markup language, CSS, cascading style sheets to style and lay out the content, and 3, JavaScript to interact with the content. After you learn those 3, then you can go to the server side and learn about the database and the server-side language. Or maybe you want to get into networking and do the infrastructure, setting up the server itself. But for a developer, for a software developer, for a web app developer, these are the 5 things that you need to know to some degree. At least you need to know where all 5 fit. Now let's get into JavaScript. Its purpose is to provide interactivity with the content so that when someone clicks on a web page, something else happens. Now, there is a little bit of overlap between JavaScript, HTML, and CSS in terms of interactivity. For example, HTML provides the hyperlink A tag, the anchor tag, and when we click that anchor tag, we go to another web page. So even HTML provides a little bit of interactivity, but that's pretty much where it stops. JavaScript can change the HTML and the CSS based on what the user's doing on the page, and that can provide all kinds of basic interactivity, which I'll demo in this short screencast, or can even provide a game. Now, what does the word script mean? Script refers to a small program, typically, but I want you to know that JavaScript is a full-blown programming language, just like Java, PHP, C#. Some people like to call it a lightweight programming language because it doesn't do some of the things that our traditional programming languages do. For example, JavaScript, when it was first developed, could not talk to the database because it was originally just designed to run in the browser, not to run on the server, not to talk to the database, but just to provide extra interactivity for the user. And we stick it into a web page using the script tag, and we reference our JavaScript file using this little script tag that you see on the screen. Now, you can also put your JavaScript directly inside those script tags. However, just like embedded CSS is not a good idea because the embedded CSS will only apply to that one page, embedded JavaScript is generally not a good idea for the exact same reasons. Typically, we want to pull our JavaScript out into an external file and point to it with the script tag as shown on the screen so that we can more easily maintain it and reuse it. One final thing before I leave this slide, I think that one of the most common and largest misconceptions in computer science today is the difference between Java and JavaScript. Unfortunately, they share the same 4 first letters of their name, but they're both programming languages but have different purposes in life. See JavaScript, you right-click your web page to view the source, and then you click the JS file to show it in the browser, just like you did with CSS. Remember, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they're all front-end languages. You can see that code directly in your browser with the right-click view source trick. To code and learn JavaScript, you need the exact same tools as HTML and CSS. To write it, you need a code editor. To run it, you just need a browser, Chrome, Firefox, edge. I'm also going to talk about some good teaching textbooks in this short screencast and some reference sites and some good YouTube video resources. But let's go look and see JavaScript. This website is called nolupus.org. And anytime you have buttons that are engaging you and do something when you click them, you probably got JavaScript. So when I play their game, they're going to ask me some questions about lupus. Lupus is an unpredictable autoimmune disease that can affect the heart and lungs, skin, or kidneys. Let's say heart and lungs. And the answer is nope, it's actually all of these. And I can go to the next question. This is a pretty impressive presentation that is interacting with me as I click on these different buttons. I'm going to say none of these, and I was correct. So that's a really beautiful example of JavaScript. Let me show you another one. This is histography.io, and it's got all kinds of different dots in history here that I can point to in the JavaScript and how it's interacting with me as I'm moving the mouse. The first computer video game was invented. If I click there, I get a picture, and I get more links, and I get more interactivity. So the hyperlink itself would be done through HTML, but anything that's reacting to moving the mouse or as I'm clicking would be based on JavaScript. Let me show you one other really good example. This is the stlouisbrowns.com, and as I scroll through these pages, no doubt JavaScript is involved to make this animation happen. I want to say a word about W3 Schools and JavaScript as well. W3 Schools is a wonderful resource, and we can learn a lot about web technologies from their little snippet examples that they provide. However, I want to warn you about JavaScript. They do a fantastic job of breaking JavaScript down into tiny bite-sized pieces and showing us examples. However, I want to point out one thing that you need to be aware of. For example, when we start with what can JavaScript do, I'm just going to click this first link, and I can run the code, and here's the resulting web page. And when we work with JavaScript, because it provides interactivity on the web page, we're often working with buttons. So when I click the Click Me button, JavaScript has changed the content. The problem with this example is the JavaScript is right here. And so they're using inline JavaScript that affects only that one HTML element. It's the exact same concept as inline CSS. Inline CSS affects only that one HTML element. In general, we want to stay away from inline JavaScript. The actual statement is valid. Study the statement, but do not stick your JavaScript in the onClick attribute in that one element because it will only apply to that one place. We're going to want to pull our JavaScript out into an external file so that we can better maintain it, and we can also reuse it. This JavaScript could not be reused because it's stuck right here in this one button element. This is an example of a final JavaScript game that one of my great students completed after only 2 credits of JavaScript. And so if I refresh this page, the game is asking me for my name, so I'm going to type in Lisa, and I'm getting a message. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the JavaScript game. I'm going to click OK, and that information now is used on the web page, so that's something JavaScript can do. It can talk to the user. It can prompt the user for information. It can take that information and put it right there in the page. And now this game is asking me some questions. Which object is the default? When I'm writing in JavaScript, if I do not specifically identify the object, I'm talking about the window object. I'm going to click for answer, and notice that I got a message here and a new question. So these are all things that JavaScript can do. JavaScript can do math. It can add numbers. It can multiply numbers. It can divide numbers. And that's really good because it has been very helpful to have JavaScript help calculate totals on shopping carts, for example. And so let's say that 10 times 2, let's put in 12. 10 times 2 is not 12, so if I click for answer, I'm getting a message that's styled in a different color than my great job message, and the game is the classic horse game. Let's look at some of the little examples in the textbook that I'm going to recommend to you. Here's a little web page, and as I'm interacting in it, as I'm typing numbers into these text boxes, content is being rendered that respects the information I'm putting in these text boxes. If I go up to 10,000 acres, the tractor recommendation is being altered. If I choose a different preferred fuel source, then the tractor recommendation is being altered. Let's look at another one. Here's a really nice little exercise in our book. It's a photo gallery, and this is a very common use for JavaScript. To move content, as I'm clicking the arrows, I'm seeing a different picture appear. I can go left now. I can show more images. Now I've got 5 images, show fewer images. Let's look at one more example. Here's a little order form, and I just really like this example because it's so common. If my delivery day is in January, I want my day drop-down list to show 31 because there's 31 days in January. But if I switch to February, I'm going to trigger some JavaScript as soon as that choice is made, and I'm going to change my drop-down list to only 28 days. That's another good little example of using JavaScript. We often see JavaScript used in forms to help validate our forms, to make sure that we're putting in valid information, because we want to catch all those errors when the user is doing the data entry. We don't want to send bad data to the server if we can help it. All 3 of those last little examples come from this textbook. This is what I use at my community college to teach JavaScript. And the reason I really like this textbook is because it uses JavaScript within well-crafted HTML and CSS files. Because JavaScript learned as a standalone language, while interesting, it's much more rewarding, in my opinion, when you're using your JavaScript to actually do something on a web page. And so, for example, this JavaScript right here, if I right-click and I view my page source, I can scroll to the bottom and see that the script tag is photos.js. We typically load our script tag right before the closing body tag because, after all, we don't need to read that JavaScript until the page is already loaded, because what's the JavaScript for again? It's for user interactivity. And the user is not going to be interacting, scrolling on that page and clicking on that page, interacting with that page until after it's loaded. So most people will go ahead and load their JavaScript right before the closing body tag. Let's look at this JavaScript in a code editor. And here I have it opened in Notepad++. And when we pull out our JavaScript into an external file and simply point to it from our HTML file, then our code editor can color code for this language. It can color code for JavaScript. And I can reuse any code that I put in my external file if I create a function, which is simply a wrapper for several statements of code, and I've given that wrapper a name. And so I can call that name in multiple places in multiple HTML files. In my opinion, it's most satisfying to learn JavaScript after you've learned HTML and CSS, and to use your JavaScript to manipulate your HTML and CSS. And that's exactly what this JavaScript is doing. So exciting. Now, some people will learn JavaScript as a standalone language without HTML and CSS knowledge. They'll simply learn the constructs, how to declare variables, how to write functions, how to do loops, how to do if statements, without applying the JavaScript to a web page. To me, that's much less satisfying than learning your JavaScript to actually go to the document, go to the web page, get something, and manipulate it. I think that's how JavaScript is most meaningfully taught. However, there is one author I want to put you onto that knows JavaScript so well, and it's Tony, and he has a free 3.5-hour JavaScript YouTube that is wonderful. I've got one other great internet resource that I want to put you onto as far as learning JavaScript, and freecodecamp.com. Now, this site just rocks. They have many different exercises that walk you through all kinds of skills. HTML5 and CSS, it provides you with a sequential number of exercises that you must pass through before you can go to the next lesson. There are a ton of JavaScript exercises, and what they do is provide you with a little sample problem and ask you to solve that problem using JavaScript in their code editor. So that's the full stack. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are in the front end. That's where you need to start, in my opinion, because those are the 3 technologies that a browser will compile And those are the three technologies that you use to talk to, style for, and interact with a human. The full stack, you can do it.